When we think of the Titanic, the 1997 film that captivated audiences worldwide often comes to mind. Many of us learned about the Titanic through this movie. Despite its absurdities, the film featuring DiCaprio and Winslet is indeed remarkable, and there's no denying that. However, upon reflection, the Titanic was not a film about the love story between Jack and Rose. The Titanic is a story of management failure, a natural disaster, and an engineering catastrophe. When we delve beyond the romance narrative and examine this tragic event, we'll discover a fascinating scientific story about how a marvel of engineering, a ship claimed to be unsinkable, could sink so easily on its maiden voyage. Let's explore the true story of the Titanic together. The Titanic was built as one of the largest and most luxurious ships of its time. This passenger liner, offering different comfort levels for various classes, was constructed in 1912 at Harland & Wolff Shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, at a cost of $7.5 million. The ship measured 269.1 meters in length, 28.2 meters in width, and 53.3 meters in height. It had spacious suites and luxurious dining rooms for first-class passengers, comfortable rooms for second-class passengers, and basic cabins for third-class passengers. The Titanic weighed 46,328 tons, with a passenger capacity of 2,435 and 900 crew members. The ship was powered by 2 triple-expansion steam engines and 1 steam turbine, providing a total of 46,000 horsepower. This allowed the Titanic to reach a maximum speed of 23 knots. The Titanic set out on its maiden and final voyage on April 10, 1912, from Southampton. While traveling through the icy waters of the North Atlantic, it struck an iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on April 14, 1912, and sank approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes later. Over 1,500 people lost their lives in this disaster, and about 700 survived. Among the critical mistakes that led to the ship's sinking, one of the most glaring was the insufficient number of lifeboats. The Titanic only had 20 lifeboats, which was inadequate for the number of passengers and crew on board. The ship was designed to carry 64 lifeboats, but due to the belief that it was unsinkable and the idea that having too many lifeboats would make the deck look crowded and unsightly, only 16 lifeboats were installed instead of the planned 48. With 4 collapsible lifeboats included, the lifeboat capacity was reduced to 1,178, which was only about 53% of the number of people on board when the Titanic sank. Another mistake was made before the ship's construction began. During discussions between Thomas Andrews, the chief designer, and Bruce Ismay, the investor and owner, the design was altered to include grand and impressive staircases as requested by the investor. This change pushed the structural limits of the ship. The bulkheads that would have been crucial for preventing flooding were built lower than necessary to accommodate more space for the staircases. These compartments, which should have been above the waterline, were only 3 meters above it due to these design choices, leading to the ship taking on water much more rapidly than it should have. A third and perhaps the most significant mistake was related to the materials used in construction. In 1912, steel was just beginning to replace iron in shipbuilding. Iron, being softer and more brittle than steel, was used previously. Metallurgists discovered that adding even 1 to 2% carbon to iron created a much tougher material. However, welding this material was challenging at the time. Riveted plates were used throughout the ship, but as the plates tapered towards the bow, steel riveting machines could not reach the front sections. Thus, iron rivets, which were much weaker and more prone to breaking under stress, were used at the ship's front. This significant flaw allowed the Iceberg to open the hull like a zipper. These cumulative errors could have been prevented by a single decision: the requirement for commercial vessels to obtain approval from the British Board of Trade. This approval could have been denied due to the insufficient lifeboat capacity relative to the number of passengers. However, lifeboat requirements were based on a fixed number at that time, which was 1,060. Consequently, it was deemed that the Titanic had sufficient lifeboats, and it was granted permission to sail. A few months before the voyage, some unfortunate events caused delays in the ship's journey. In March 1912, while preparations were ongoing, news arrived that the Titanic's sister ship, the Olympic, had been damaged in an accident and was urgently docked. The repairs delayed the Titanic's maiden voyage by 1 month. This delay also led to changes in the crew, contributing to the inevitable disaster. After the delay, the new third officer accidentally took the key to the locker containing binoculars used by the lookouts, leaving them without binoculars. Although there were enough binoculars on the ship, no one bothered to bring them to the lookout station, leading to a delayed detection of the iceberg. With all these issues, the Titanic embarked on its maiden and final voyage on April 10, 1912. Another unforgivable mistake that brought the ship closer to its fate was made in the communications room. The Titanic was equipped with the most advanced communication technology of its time. While many ships had communication ranges of 300 to 400 kilometers, Titanic's range was extended to 650 kilometers. This communication network was crucial for ships crossing the Atlantic, as they reported any potential hazards, including icebergs, to each other. A critical error in the communication room stemmed from the low pay of the staff. The crew used the communication system not only for safety communication, but also to send and receive passenger messages, earning tips in the process. They were making much more money through tips than their salary. The crew made a significant error. They had received iceberg warnings from 6 ships since their departure. One of these ships was the SS Californian, which decided to continue its journey during the day due to the high number of icebergs in the area. The Titanic sent a warning message about this situation. However, at that moment, Jack Phillips, who was the only operator in the Titanic's communication room, ignored the Californian's warning message while dealing with passenger messages and replied, "Shut up, I'm working on messages from the center." The Californian's operator was offended by this response and turned off Titanic's communication signals. This was a fatal mistake for the Titanic, as the Californian was the closest ship to the disaster site. The series of mistakes led to the beginning of the end for Titanic, which was traveling at 41 kilometers per hour in a dark, iceberg-filled ocean. At 11:30 p.m., 2 lookouts in the crow's nest without binoculars saw a glimmer on the horizon but could not identify it. They only realized the danger 9 minutes later, just a few hundred meters before the collision, and quickly used the phone to shout, "Iceberg right ahead!" In just 35 seconds, alarms began to sound, engines were stopped and reversed. This was a routine maneuver to slowly turn the ship, but it was one of the poor decisions made. The massive ship required 800 meters to stop, but the iceberg was only 274 meters away. The Titanic slowly turned left and the iceberg remained on its starboard side. However, the turn was not fast enough, causing the iceberg to hit the ship's side rather than its front. The iceberg's submerged parts sliced through the hull like a zipper, causing severe damage. According to estimates, the Titanic could have stayed afloat even if 4 of its 16 compartments were flooded. However, since the Titanic struck the iceberg on the side, 5 compartments were flooded simultaneously, allowing about 7 tons of water to enter every second. The ensuing chaos, panic, and struggle for survival were depicted in the film. The ship's orchestra continued to play music in an attempt to calm passengers. Many jumped into the icy water to save themselves, but perished from hypothermia. Before sinking, the Titanic split into 2 parts, killing dozens trapped below. Many people, especially poorer passengers, drowned in their cabins. The supposedly unsinkable Titanic sank in just 2.5 hours, a remarkably rapid sinking speed. With insufficient lifeboats, distress calls were sent to nearby ships, but the closest ship, the Californian, never came to aid due to the communication issue. The nearest ship that could assist was the Carpathia, located 93 kilometers away and moving slowly. By the time the Carpathia arrived, the Titanic had already sunk, causing many to die from hypothermia. Emergency drills on the ship were not conducted regularly. This lack of preparedness led to confusion and ineffective use of lifeboats during the disaster. Additionally, some crew members misunderstood the captain's order to prioritize women and children, leading to separation of families and underutilization of the lifeboats. As a result, the impact of the disaster was exacerbated. Coincidentally, one of the few surviving men was the shipowner Bruce Ismay, who used his authority to board one of the lifeboats he had reduced in number. The story of the Titanic is such. The Titanic did not sink merely because of an iceberg. It was a result of design flaws, material choices, technological errors, equipment shortages, communication failures, and greed. The Titanic sank due to numerous preventable mistakes.